Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Prendergast, and I'm the Bachelor of Arts in Psychology Program Chair and Assistant Professor here at University of Arizona Global Campus. I am pleased to welcome you to the session today titled Working with the Brain, Not Against It, Designing Care-Based Learning That Sticks by Stephanie Powell. Stephanie Powell is a speaker and brain science strategist who has helped organizations with the brain instead of against it. With 13 years of experience inside education systems spanning teaching, learning design, and organizational leadership, she brings firsthand knowledge of how institutional environments affect cognition, performance, and retention. Her work sits at the intersection of neuroscience, system design, and leadership, translating research on threat response, cognitive load, and neurobiological safety into strategies leaders can act on, especially in complexity environments where traditional approaches have stalled. Stephanie is the founder of ShiftStorm and is currently pursuing doctoral research on the gap between psychological safety as a concept and neurobiological safety as a condition. She has previously presented at the ASPA annual conference and brings both academic rigor and practical experience to every session. Please join me in welcoming Stephanie Powell.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here today. Let me share my screen so we can get started. All right. Yes, so working with the brain and instead of against it. And again, and you heard it in my intro, but I spent 13 years in education and then plus the years since I've been doing adult learning since then, just watching really, really smart people design training that accidentally works against the brain instead of with it. And so my hope is that today we can fix a little bit of that. So here is the dirty secret about professional development is most training is designed for compliance, not learning. We build sessions around the content, what needs to be covered, rather than instead of around the actual brain, how people are actually processing, retaining, and applying that information. So what we find is that the problem really isn't that people don't care. It's not effort, it's not attitude. It's just that most of these learning environments are designed to work against the brain, and that is purely accidental. It's certainly not intentional. And sorry, hang on, I have to move my Zoom window because it's in my way. Um, the forgetting curve, right? 70% can be forgotten within 24 hours after a traditional training session. And so if we really think about that, outside of today, which there have been a lot of opportunities in the last couple of days for learning sessions, but even if we think about maybe a session that we watched yesterday, right? Or a training that you went through last week, like how many of us can think about that training and remember 3 whole takeaways, right? And that starts to become a struggle. That's not a you problem as a learner, it's a design problem, right? And 90% of that material can be forgotten within a week of what we originally learned. Let's see here. Come on. Sorry, my slides aren't working. There we go. Okay, there are 3 things that the brain needs in order to learn, right? We can, before we fix any of our training design, we really need to understand the neuroscience behind how the brain actually learns and what can get in the way. So number one, it's always about safety before learning. Your brain's primary job is to keep you safe, and that takes precedence over literally anything and everything else. And when our nervous systems detect a threat, and they are constantly scanning for threats, whether that be an actual physical threat, like, hey, I'm in the water and there's a shark fin, or it's the fear of being singled out, it's confusion, it's judgment, whatever it might be, the prefrontal cortex goes partially offline because we are now rerouting almost all of our energy into what do we have to do to keep ourselves safe and prevent this threat from becoming a problem. A brain that is managing threat is not available for new information, right? This is not a motivation problem. It's a capacity problem. Okay. So number two that the brain needs to learn, emotion is typically like our filing system. So information that arrives with emotional weight gets prioritized for storage. This is also where we get into certain, and I won't go deep into this, but certain confirmation biases. For example, anchoring bias. The first thing that we hear about something typically sticks with us. But also, there are different things that whenever, that's why we remember things that were really positive or really negative, because there's that emotion that's attached to it. So when we get flat information, if there's no connection, no relevance, our brain tends to discard that. And that's why you remember pivotal life moments, but maybe you don't remember what happened in last Tuesday's staff meeting. And then number three, the brain needs experiences, not instructions. So saying just remember these 5 steps, like what I'm doing right now, that doesn't necessarily work, right? The brain doesn't store those instructions efficiently. What the brain stores is patterns, stories, and experiences. So when we learning, like if we want the learning to stick, we have to give the brain something to see and do, not just hear. So on the previous slide, when I said, hey, how many of us can remember 3 takeaways from our last training? That is rooting what we're talking about in your own personal experience. So here's how we accidentally can design against the brain. One, information overload. When we cram 90 minutes or more of content into 60 minutes, right? We have to understand and remember that the brain holds 3 to 5 new concepts at a time. And if we surpass that, the brain's not really learning, it's just enduring, right? So when we sit through trainings and maybe somebody like me, right? If you were to sit here and listen to me for 90 minutes, and then at the end I say, "Are there any questions?" Everybody just kind of sits there and just has this blank look, right? Because that really wasn't training. It's more like taking the brain hostage for 90 minutes and kind of forcing it to just dive, like ingest as much as I can possibly give, right? Um, then we have cold calls and surprise participation. So, and this is a really big one, especially for brains that may be wired a bit differently. When we have things like let's go around the room, that automatically can trigger the brain for a lot of individuals. Like that triggers that threat scan, right? And so now we're way more concerned with protection of ourselves rather than whatever the content was. And I can speak from definite personal experience on this one, right? I happen to be autistic and ADHD, and so when it's let's go around the room, or if it's like the icebreakers that say we're going to go around and introduce yourself and say one fun fact, like my brain just spirals out of control, right? I'm no longer concerned about anything else but going, okay, but what's fun about me? But wait, what if somebody else doesn't think that's fun? Maybe I'm not fun, right? So again, that can accidentally work against the brain. And for a lot of people, they love stuff like this. But for a lot of others, it definitely activates that threat for us, all right? When we give content without context, that also works against the brain. When we jump into material before we actually answer, why does this matter to me? Right? The brain files that as low priority. That's right in line with having holding on to the things that have emotion and have relevance. So we want people to know why it matters to them. And we have to give processing time, right? The brain needs micro moments of consolidation. So even 30 seconds of just that quiet reflection helps us move information from short-term to long-term memory. Okay, so safety first, content second. We're going to go through a couple different principles that can help us make this shift and help us to work with the brain rather than against it. And so principle one, safety first, content second. Before you deliver a single piece of content, the brain has to be able to know that it is safe. So it's going to ask the question, am I safe here? And it has to be able to answer it with a yes. Now, I want to be really clear. The brain feeling safe and the idea of psychological safety, which, if you're not familiar with that, it is the belief that you can ask questions, push back, make mistakes, right? You can do all those things without fear of negative repercussions. So, that idea of being safe, that does not mean that we have to make everything comfortable. Feeling comfortable and feeling safe are two very different things. We grow outside of our comfort zones, but we have to know that it's okay while we're growing outside of our comfort zone, that if we stumble, no one's going to point and laugh at us, right? So it really means reducing unnecessary threat so that our brains now have the capacity for the necessary challenge of learning. So we can open with connection, right? And I know this is going to seem a little counterintuitive based on what I said on the last slide, but even if we just have share one thing on your mind today, that doesn't have to be a requirement, right? That can be just something as simple as I would love for anybody who's willing to share what's on your mind. Or maybe it's going into a session and saying, before we even get started, would anyone like to say what they're hoping they'll learn today? What do they think today is going to be about? Right? And what happens is when we ask questions, now the brain shifts into problem solving mode anytime we ask questions. So we get to shift from scanning for threats to actually settling in and problem solving and answering the question before the content even begins. We also need to normalize not knowing, especially when it comes to training, because the whole idea is if we already knew the things, we wouldn't need the training, right? So normalizing that and actually normalizing it by saying it, we have to name it and say, you are not expected to know this yet because that is why we're here. Just that one sentence can have a massive impact on a perceived threat level. For me, I feel like this shows up a lot when maybe we're in a training or even if it's just in like a group call or whatever it might be. And it's like, what do we think the answer here is? Or what do you think? I know that I am constantly going, I don't want to answer because I know what I think, but what if it's the wrong answer? And once somebody normalizes, I don't expect anyone to have the right answer. And if you do, great. But if you don't, that's okay too. My brain relaxes a little bit and it kind of gives itself permission to contribute. And then giving participation choices. This is really huge, and this is really all about accessibility. Whether we're allowing people to chat, do it with voice, pair and share, written reflections, however we're wanting to do that, those options really reduce the am I about to be put on the spot threat. And again, threat shuts learning down completely. Once again, I know for me, this is a huge thing. I don't typically, I mean, speaking is my bread and butter, so I don't always mind being put on the spot, but it's more if I have a little bit of time to prepare. I really like being able to utilize when it's online chat features because I typically am an individual that has a lot of questions, and I don't want to feel like I am monopolizing that group session by constantly coming off of mute or constantly raising my hand in a meeting and asking questions. So being able to write things down to submit for later or in a chat, I love having that. So just giving those participation choices really opens up accessibility and it gives people the option just to participate in whatever way feels the most comfortable for them. So principle number 2, emotion before information. If we want people to remember something, we want to make them feel something first. Doesn't always mean it has to be dramatic, but creating that relevance, that's what helps anchor things in. So we can lead with a story or a scenario, right? So for example, the one I have in here is imagine you just got feedback that your team's engagement score dropped 20 points. What is the first thing your brain does? Now people are in that scenario, right? The information has somewhere to land and somewhere to go. We can also apply the so what test. For every piece of content, why should the brain care? And if you can't answer that, there's a chance that it won't be retained. And then building personal connections. When have you seen this in your own work or in your own life? Once again, this is a relevance piece, right? That question, now we're taking the content from abstract or theoretical to autobiographical. It's now real and active in that individual's life. And autobiographical memory is the stickiest kind of memory that we have. Principle 3, process over volume. Less content, more processing every time. And this can be really challenging. I want to acknowledge that and name it. And again, I am speaking from experience because I am a nerd at heart and I will be a forever student and I love learning. And because of my autistic brain, it's all important to me, right? So when I'm putting together keynotes and presentations, I always start out with way more than it needs to be, and I have to whittle it down, and that can be really challenging. But the reality is, if I don't do that, then at some point, everyone's just drowning, right? So I need to do less of the content and give more room for processing because the brain doesn't learn during the input. It learns in the pause after the input, right? When it consolidates, connects, and makes meaning. A lot of times our brains just need some time to marinate on what we've been given before it really sinks in and we can make those connections. So there's the 10 and 2 principle. For every 10 minutes of content, build in 2 minutes of processing, whether that's reflection, pair and share, written response, even silence, right? This is especially important when we're going into trainings that start to get into that 60-minute and up interval, right? Being able just to give that little, just that breath. Giving people something to do when we're trying to train them. Application is processing, right? How would you apply this to your next meeting? Moves the information from I've heard it to now I've used it, even if only in a theoretical or conceptual sense. And we end with retrieval. Don't always summarize key points for people. Ask them, what is one thing that really stuck with you? That retrieval strengthens those neural pathways. The review just repeats the input. And a lot of times when we're reviewing, we tend to sort of maybe not shut off all the way, but glaze over a little bit because we're like, yeah, I've heard this before. I don't need to hear it again. And all of that's taking place on a subconscious level. So care-based learning is brain-based learning. Every training session is a message to the nervous system, and it's going to say one of two things. It's either going to tell you, your brain, your body, your nervous system, you are safe to learn here, or you'd better protect yourself. And we do get to choose which message we send. But make no mistake, we're sending a message whether we want to or not. So we want to be intentional with which one we're picking, right? So everything that we've covered thus far today in this little short session, right? Safety, emotion, processing, that is care applied to learning design. Because when we design with the brain in mind, we stop punishing people for not knowing, right? We stop mistaking silence for understanding, and we stop equating the volume of content with a quality of learning. This is when we get to start really creating experiences where people can actually think, connect, and retain because their nervous systems aren't spending all its energy on self-protection. And the other thing that I just want to, a fun little brain nerd fact that I want to throw in here, when we talk about why it's so important to create that safety for the nervous system, one of the interesting things that I think either not everyone knows about how the brain learns or that we forget is that failure and making mistakes is a critical non-negotiable part of learning. And the reason for that, and I'm definitely oversimplifying this, is that when we get something wrong, or we fail, or we make a mistake, that creates, for most of us, a pretty significant emotion. And it's that anchoring, right, that helps really solidify what it is we're learning. Rather than if we just got it right the whole entire time, if we're things that we're natural at, we always get right, may not retain as much as opposed to something that if we're interactive and I feel safe saying something and I get to the wrong answer and somebody goes, That's actually not the right answer. Go back. Well, now my brain, it's in problem solving mode, right? And I have to use more than just listening. I have to get in there and use those critical thinking skills and go, okay, if that was wrong, why was it wrong? Where did it go wrong? How does it make it right? And all of these things that are taking place within those, and that's strengthening the neural pathways and the neural networks. So failure is a part of learning. So a quick little audit, right? For your next experience, next training, meeting, learning experience. And even if you wanted to do this, right? Thinking about maybe something that you've experienced recently. But number one, safety. How does it start? Is there a moment? Are we creating space? Are we creating an opportunity for the brain to settle comfortably before the content begins? What reduces unnecessary threat within that first 5 minutes? Two, emotion. Is there a hook, a story, a question, a scenario, something that creates relevance before the information lands? Can the people that we're talking to see themselves in the content? And three, processing. Where are the pauses? Is there at least one moment where people do something with the content instead of just receiving it? Right? We want to make sure that those pauses are intentional because that's the only way we can guarantee that they will be there, right? And so, like a nice little reflection, and I would love for people to actually do this in the chat if you feel comfortable doing so. But I would love for you to, like, what's one thing that you would like to change about your next learning experience based on what we're covering right now? And so for anybody that's, like I said, that's willing and comfortable to share, I would love for you to do that. And I'm also going back through the chat while people are doing that. Dr. Myers, I totally agree with you. And I'm sorry if I'm distracting anybody while I do this, but popcorn surprise participation is so awful. And I don't know how many of you have maybe seen that meme of when it's like, like if you were the kid in school where if we had assigned readings and you were reading out loud, you were the kid that jumped ahead and counted the paragraphs to figure out which one you were going to read so you could rehearse it in your head a couple of times. Yeah, that was me. That was definitely me. Taking a moment to allow time for processing and making the learning meaningful. Yeah, absolutely. And that's just something that I will say this too. I don't want to sit here and it's easy to talk about these things and I don't want it to appear that I am saying this is all completely easy and it's not at all challenging and no one should have a problem with it. And I say that because especially when we're doing content that's important to us and that's meaningful to us, sometimes it's a little bit challenging because we're like, okay, why do I have to tell them why this is important to them? Of course it's important, right? That shouldn't it be important? And it's like with my content right here. It's it's beyond my brain why anyone would not think that this is important, right? But that's because it's important to me. And it's important to me because of my own lived experiences. So I have to be able to go, okay, how can I get everyone to see themselves in what I'm talking about? Right. And that's why I use the examples of like the popcorn participation. In one of my previous sessions, I talked about when we don't give the brain enough context, it fills in the gaps for us. And it always goes with the worst case scenario. So when we get emails from our superiors that say, come see me, and the brain just starts to spiral, right? It's those types of things. It's getting people, giving them an opportunity to go, oh my gosh, I didn't think of it that way, and to see themselves in what you're talking about. Let's see. Donald said, I can see redesigning discussions into 3 separate postings during the week. So yeah, I love that. That's really good. Your message of safety first is a lovely compliment, Dr. Culver's presentation before yours. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that for sure. And I appreciate those of you that threw something into the chat. Thank you for participating and for doing that. All right, so as we continue, 3 questions that we want to ask before we design really anything. right? These three can become your filter before trainings, before meetings, before the learning experiences that we're building. Number one, is the brain safe enough to learn? Have I reduced the unnecessary threat so that capacity is available for content and not self-protection? Number two, does the brain have a reason to care? Have I created emotional relevance before I deliver all of the good stuff? Or am I just launching straight into the slides? And then number three, am I giving the brain time to process? Have I built in pauses, application moments, and retrieval practice? Or am I just covering content? So, learning that sticks, it's always going to start with care. When we work with the brain instead of against it, we're not just improving the learning outcomes, we're literally changing the experience of being a learner, right? People all of a sudden stop dreading training or learning. They stop checking out. They start leaning in because their nervous system got the message. It is safe to learn here. So, what I want us to remember as we're making a shift is that it's not about softer or easier, just designing for how the brain actually works, right? And then remembering that safety plus emotion plus processing, that's where we get the learning that really does last. And so I open it up if anybody has any questions or comments. The QR code that you see is my contact information. I always tell anyone and everyone. So if you saw me earlier today, you heard this. Um, this is my heartbeat right here, right? Working with the brain and not against it. This is everything that I like to do. And so I could talk about this literally all day, every day, no matter what. So don't ever worry that you're going to bother me if you have a question or a thought or an insight, because all that means is that if you send me a message, I get to nerd out on what I love the most. But if anybody has anything, if you want to pop it in the chat or come off mute and ask a question, I would love to answer anything that I can. Anybody?
Stephanie, I was going to type in the chat, but I'll just say it out loud. I'm thinking about giving feedback to students and how we dive right into what needs fixed. But how lovely would it be to say something positive to establish safety before we start giving feedback of what needs fixed? So I appreciate this reminder today to bring in that positivity to generate safety before I start giving feedback.
I love that, and I can tell you as a doctoral student at UAGC, it it resonates. It truly does, and it may not be something that a student can name on their own, right? Because again, so much of this is taking place subconsciously. But I feel like I've been super duper fortunate, and I'm not just saying this because of the audience. Like, I feel like I've been super duper fortunate that I would say the majority of my professors have just been really great. And yes, they deliver. It's like it's about being. There's a term that in another company that I work for, but about being compassionately critical. Yes, they deliver feedback, and yes, especially at a doctoral level, your writing it's going to get hammered because it has to, because you're going to do a dissertation. But they've all usually been really, really good about recognizing what's being done well, but also giving me the feedback of, hey, I need you to look at this because it's going to matter when you do your dissertation. That was always a really big thing for me too. Not just I'm nitpicking to nitpick. I am nitpicking and I'm bringing this to your attention because it is going to matter for you later. And I want to give you as much of a leg up as I possibly can. Right. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't necessarily think it always has to be the compliment sandwich, good, bad, good. But I do think that there is always a way to deliver that feedback in a way that still communicates the care and communicates, I am telling you this because I genuinely want you to do well and to learn and to progress, not because I'm just trying to red pin every single thing that I can. And I think too, I think especially as adults, students, I mean, we're going to pick up on the difference. We always know the difference, even if we can't name it. And I don't know if it's Janine or if I'm saying that right, but I love that you're doing a presentation on psychological safety. I love that. Anybody else?
Stephanie,
Yes.
this is Mitzi Lee. I'm real curious about your input, other than what's in it for me,
Mhm.
with a reluctant adult learner of I am required to be here. All right. I want to be entertained, as well as a learner that thinks they already know it all.
Man, that's such a good question. And I can identify with both of those learners, to be completely transparent. I can identify with both of those, right? And so I'll go backward. On the second one, I think probably and I don't feel like I have ever intentionally from a conscious standpoint thought to myself, I know everything and I don't need to pay attention. But I have gone into trainings, meetings, classes, environments, whatever it might be, thinking, oh, I pretty much know this. And one of the things that has really kind of just been great for me that I've experienced is I did a training recently, and the head of the training said, I just want to invite everyone. I want to invite everyone to ask yourself, is there a chance that I might be wrong? Or what do I not know about this? And the beautiful part about that invitation is it didn't call anybody out, right? But for those of us that sometimes maybe come into it and go, oh, this is already my thing, and it was a great challenge for me. And it was a reminder that, you know what? I may know a lot, and maybe I know more than some other people, but I really don't know everything. And there's just no way for me to know everything. And if for no other reason than the fact that our learning is exponentially increased when we get different perspectives. So I can know what I know, but until I get other perspectives and lived experiences and things like that, there's always going to be something else for me to learn, or a different angle for me to look at it. So I found that works really well for me. Um, I mean, there are still going to be people that do think that they know it all, and it, that's just it, when we're in education, it's just kind of one of those that we have to go, okay, and sometimes we have
That's
to,
all right.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
I
Sometimes we just
love
have to
that
we have to let them
question.
learn.
I love that question.
And then for the other learner, right? That's like I have to be here, or
I have
it,
to be here.
right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So here, and I guess it just depends on what is authentic to you. If you're talking about a course, a training, different things. Um, I have been in that position as a learner, and I've been in the position as a trainer or as an educator. There have been times where I have felt it is appropriate, and I have really leaned into it to say to people, if it's something that's maybe compulsory, and I'm like, guys, I know we all would so much rather be somewhere else right now. Like, I know none of us is super excited to talk about this thing right here. Like, I totally get it. I'm going to make it as painless as possible. We know we got to do it. We know we got to get through it. So, you know what? Let's soldier on together. And I think
Mhm. Okay.
sometimes just the naming of it gives people, because a lot of times what our systems tend to buck up against is when people try to insist that it is important to us when it's not. There are going to be
That's
things that we have
right.
to learn that are not important, that we don't care about, but we still have to learn them. And so when somebody goes, look, I know this is not what you want to be doing right now. We got to get through it together. I will make it as painless as possible. That all of a sudden, I think, gives people just room to go, oh, thank goodness, somebody's being real, and we're not standing on the pretense that this is the
Right.
most important thing in everyone's life. Now, it may not always be appropriate to preface something like that. And so in those moments, you know, I think the best thing is just, even if it's a student that's like, I couldn't care less about this. I'm only here because I have to be. Okay, well, let's roll with that then. We
Yeah.
already know you have to be here, right? And we know you don't want to. And I see that and I honor that and I respect it. But you said it yourself. You got to be here. You got to do it. So let's just do it, right?
Yeah.
Let's just let's get through it. And same thing, let's make it as painless as possible because if it's a training or if it's a class and it's something they have to do, if they cannot show mastery, proficiency, get the grade, whatever it is, they're just going to have to do it again anyway.
Right.
And so at
Right.
that point, to me, it becomes about let's get done. Like you know
Yeah.
you don't want, so let's just get done so you don't have to do it anymore. Right. So I think, and I think sometimes we have to remember that, sometimes the things that are important to us, they're not going to be, like I said, we're all going to have content, I think, where somebody goes, I'm taking this because I have to. And
That's right.
it breaks my heart to think that anyone would think anything that I'm teaching is not important. But,
I know. I know.
you know,
Thank you so
absolutely.
much.
Yeah,
That's so
absolutely.
great.
Yeah. I'm reading Sherry's note. I often tell people they need to provide meaningful analysis and feedback. And now I feel like I have a neurological explanation. Explaining why something matters is about, yep, personal significance. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else want to jump in?
There are a couple of messages below that as
Oh,
well.
thank you.
Oh, wait.
I don't
Oh, wait. No, you got it, I think.
okay. I was gonna say I don't see any, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't any.
Well, I thought this was such a great talk. Thank you so much for your time today. If you were as excited as I am about this talk, then make sure you vote for your favorite one. There are links in the chat right now for 2 awards, the Clifford Blizzard Award for Passionate Care and Creative Excellence, and then there is also the UAGC Wellness Warrior Award. So make sure that you click on those links and put in your 2 cents for which talks you thought were the best today. That concludes the presentation, Working with the Brain, Not Against It, Designing Care-Based Learning That Sticks. Thank you to all our attendees for joining us today. We hope you found the work or the talk inspiring and that you enjoy the other talks that you've seen today. Have a
Thanks,
great day,
everybody.
everyone.